I lead the intelligence sector in the UK and Ireland. Just to kind of start off, there's a couple of observations from this morning, and I think it kind of sets the scene for what we'll talk about with transport. It was Tom mentioned that the importance of data and connectivity to properties, and a colleague was conducting research amongst young people and presenting it in Davos in the last month or so, and it was shown that for those young people, the internet and connectivity are now viewed as basic human rights. And as the father of 2 teens, I think it's more important than that. Certainly when I'm told the Wi-Fi doesn't work in the house. The other one was Nigel had mentioned that 90% of buildings were constructed pre-internet. Now, when you look at the transport network, it's almost probably 100% of our infrastructure, almost really certainly the high 99% were constructed in those days. So where things are coming on now in technology and digital and data and lots of changes, it's all the same. It's really, this is transformational. And I think I feel quite passionate about this and the impact that will have in transport. IBI, you might know us from more of our architecture and building and planning activities, but we are an integrated design and technology practice. I had about 25 years involved in transport infrastructure, transport systems, and that more recently is related to more of the smart city type areas. And we're now integrating all of these things that we've been doing for many years across everything we do as an organization. And to put it in the context of a city, I guess from the 60s and 70s, when we started to see technology and systems coming in, it was all quite siloed and segmented, and it was a kind of city of individual bits and pieces. Started to see those becoming a little more connected, and now with, again, really advent of smart city and more of the technologies and the connections between all these systems, it really is a responsive, resilient, really hyper-connected city, but I see transport is at the heart of that, and a lot of the operations and how you define transport of people, vehicles, of goods and everything, it's really at the heart of a functioning city. So an image everyone's familiar with from Metropolis and this future vision of a city, is that what's happened? And to be honest, nowadays, it's not far off it. You get congestion, you experience in most places, so it's all car-based and congestion. That leads to a lot of air quality issues, and there's the health problems that's becoming increasingly prevalent that's associated with that. Whilst we're good of good transport links, it's also quite susceptible and isn't as resilient as perhaps it should be. I was confronted with this one night coming into Euston. Now, a lot of people, for heading home, doing their normal duties or whatever, it's a real sense of frustration when you see that. From my perspective, it's time for a pint. It's not too bad. I'm heading home, so I'm not too worried when I see that, but I know it's got big issues for others. But as well as those, that's just some of the kind of trends that we see. There's other kind of mega trends that's related to this. You've got aging population, as I mentioned with the air quality, it's again health and well-being. There's broader environmental issues and climate change, urbanization, and all of the economic impacts that will have. So how will transport and future transport address all of these things? So the one word that we'll use is space. Now, it's not space as in, up there as Elon Musk has been launching satellites and trying to prove things, but it's space as in shared, personalized, autonomous, connected, and electrified. And all of these relate to how we'll see future changes in how transport will be delivered and the city. So the first is in the connected area. The days of effectively dumb cars are over. If anybody that's driving a car that's probably manufactured in the last few years, these are just a hotbed of systems and computers and data that's being transmitted. It's vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to anything effectively. And it's not just the vehicles. You also have people are more and more connected with devices that they have, place, buildings, and that connectivity between all of those aspects is leading to improvements in safety, efficiencies in how networks operate, incredible data sets that's coming out from these, and that can really drive a lot of the changes in how we start to think about planning and designing cities and buildings and the interaction between people and these things. It's also the communication side is promoting a lot more of the connectivity. And 5G are trials that are going on at the moment. We've been doing some work in Bristol and looking at the safety element and how that can relate to smart tourism. Again, it comes back to that slide with all the interconnected systems. One system has so many different outputs. But you get 5G, and from this confusingly from our perspective, in the transport system side, we love an acronym and I love all summaries of things. There's also G5, which is a completely different thing from 5G. You also get more satellite communications coming in. So the communications infrastructure, not just in cities, but there's a lot of black spots there, but in rural areas, you're looking at smart place, the communications infrastructure will be there that will transform all of these areas. Second part is electrification, and again, just a couple of recent news stories. One from the BBC this week about the Geneva Motor Show, and it just shows the amount of investment that the motor industry are putting into those new vehicles and the uptake. It's aligned with policy changes, again, trying to address the emissions problem and the air quality issues that you have in cities, as well as the trying to decarbonise transport, which is always recognised as one of the big contributors to those problems. So you will start to see more electric vehicles on the road. It has challenges in terms of providing infrastructure, but it's happening. Again, there's massive investment going in there. Again, it's clean air zones will be implemented throughout the UK, Birmingham being one of them. The consultation ended last year. And again, that will start to see more limits on what vehicles can come into and travel around our cities. And again, that will have the health benefits. But you still have connected vehicles, electric vehicles, you still have congestion in cities. So it doesn't deliver a lot of economic benefits that it might do. So then you're looking at autonomous. Now, these are some of the trials that have been going on in the UK. The one on the left is in Greenwich, just around where the O2 arena is, and in the right is in Milton Keynes, with the Transport Systems Catapult. Now, they don't look as if they'd be really practical, but these are just trials. It's the technology and the proof of concept and what you can get from these. But it is actually happening. This is colleagues in Australia and New Zealand have been trialling these autonomous vehicles out on the open roads. There's nobody in there to drive it or oversee it. It has all the technology there, and these are just driving around city streets as they normally would. There's other trials in Europe. I was reading earlier in the week in Switzerland, in the city of Schaffhausen. They have to have an attendant on board at the moment because people just aren't used to it and they're not familiar getting onto a public transport vehicle where there's no driver. But it's happening. In Scotland, they're trialling autonomous, proper-sized double-decker buses that will be going across the fourth corridor, again, to prove the concept and learn from it. But this, certainly just one aspect, is public transport and how you can transform that. But it's also in cars that will have a real opportunity to progress this. Addison Lee, the taxi company predominantly in London, said they're looking at introducing driverless cars in 2020 or 2021. You have an aging population, so driverless vehicles will allow them to maintain their mobility in a safe manner when they reach a certain age that driving in a car as we would know it today doesn't become practical. And for the ordinary or everyday user, you're getting dead time back. So where you would maybe drive to commute, you don't need to. You can go in the vehicle, you can do what you have to do, and that can make a big difference. It'll also is the shared aspect of it, and it's looking at how you look at the first and last mile connectivity. It's not just looking at a car to get from the home to the business. That doesn't really address a lot of the problems of congestion. So there's a real moves on progressing shared. Now, the car ownership is where we'd normally target shared, and that's normally where you would see the real changes and where autonomous vehicles can have a difference in people using that kind of technology and that kind of vehicle to transform their travel patterns. And it was Shiraz who'd mentioned that rent or mortgage is probably an individual or a family's biggest expenditure on a monthly basis. Owning a vehicle or a new vehicle is probably the second, although, again, having two teens, it's probably the third, and the teens are the second. I know how expensive they are. But you buy a car or you buy a second car, And they sit idle for 95% of the time or more, and they take up a lot of space in the cities or in buildings. You have to provide parking, either dedicated car parks, roadside parking, parking within buildings. It's not efficient. It's not efficient use of space. And more people now don't actually own the car. People that have bought a new car in the last 5-10 years, you'd have been a PCP agreement, and I think it's more than 90% of new car sales are on that basis just now. So you actually don't own the car, you're just leasing it. So why would you spend that amount of money for something that you don't own, that sits idle for so much of the day? There's got to be much more efficient patterns of doing that. And Helsinki was probably the first city that came out and said, we want to be a zero car ownership city. Still recognise that cars have a place to play, but you don't actually need to own your own car. So how do you do that? This is where it's work that was research undertaken by Frost and Sullivan. I think it really is good and shows again, you get the distance travelled on the bottom axis and the cost and convenience on the upper axis. And it just shows the different elements. Again, public transport still has a role when you're getting a bit further distance, but that first and last mile connectivity, or maybe first and last couple of miles, car sharing, ride pooling, autonomous vehicles, shared vehicles, they've all got a big role to play in transforming how we travel. And again, that might reduce the car ownership model. You don't need to own one, or you don't need to own a second or third car in some cases. You have a car that's available to you as and when you need it. So again, it reduces costs and provides a lot more efficiencies. Mobility as a service is another kind of buzzword in the industry, or MaaS, you've probably heard. And again, it's taking advantage of everybody being connected, having smartphones and the digital technology, and there's disruptive players in the market. So you integrate the different modes together. So in this instance, it's just showing, you can have a bike or an electric bike, electric scooter, and a car. You can have public transport in there. You can bring rideshare into that as well. So you've got A to B connectivity, but across different modes, and it's more convenient. Well, it's cheaper. Might take slightly longer, but you have that convenience, particularly when you're faced with, again, when I come into Euston, as others would be coming into any city, there's disruption. So this was flexible. You don't need to fix with the one mode that you know. It will be in real time, it updates. This is how you would travel to where you're wanting to go. Brings all these different things together. And again, another bit of research, someone else, it's Deloitte, and I thought, again, this shows the kind of the nature of it, and it is evolving. There's no fixed pattern yet, and I don't think there will be. I think it will be a combination of the two. On the left, it's more of those that are involved in delivering transport systems or the services at the moment. There'll still be a role, but that they have to evolve. On the right is more of the disruptor view. And it's people that wouldn't normally be associated with delivering transport or delivering services would start to come into this space. When Uber didn't exist a relatively short time ago, now a hugely valuable company. There's similar companies worldwide. And it's the same, when you look at things like Netflix or Spotify, they've completely transformed how we would consume that kind of service. And it's the same in transport. These people are not transport companies, they're technology companies. They're looking just to commoditize it. Look at it as a utility. We'll provide you this service, you'll pay us some money, and it's a different way of delivering it. Now, the one thing I haven't touched on and won't in here for time, but is the business models behind a lot of that, and it is completely changing as well. Research that IBI has done, again, it's a bit utopian. It's, if you don't put any of the regulation in or design cities or really harness where all these changes are coming from, you could end up in a scenario, it's that kind of hell situation. I love the term zombie cars. If you've got autonomous vehicles that are just driving around the city, there's nowhere to pick up, there's no real program, the cities can't cater for them, again, you're not really solving the problems. You still have congestion. So it's how do you deal with that? The counter-argument for it is actually start to design the cities to create that transport and urban ecosystem. It's not just about transport. It's about healthy new towns, active travel, promoting these things, again, the first and last mile and shared transport, and the opportunities that has to transform cities. The last couple of images I'll put up, again, this is kind of idealized, typical city street. There's conflicting uses. There's a lot of wasted space with vehicles parking down either curbside. pedestrians of some space, but compared to the number of pedestrians versus the number it might be in vehicles traveling individually, it doesn't seem an equitable balance. So it's trying to think, again, with all these changes, what are the opportunities and how do you start to transform these things? So a city street of tomorrow potentially could look like this. You actively manage the curbside to take account of autonomous vehicles needing to drop off and pick up. You can control the flow because your vehicles are connected, so you can manage the road space more effectively. You get autonomous vehicles if people are sitting there having a chat, doing business, and again, it's more of a shared transport. It's not as perhaps efficient as public transport would be, but it's still a lot more efficient, and it's greener. You don't need to provide the same parking space or parking in buildings. So again, there's efficiencies there in use of that. And one research that we did, it was New York City, a driverless challenge a couple of years ago. And we got a few teams together, and one that I think this really relates to, looking at the amount of space in New York that could be reclaimed from adopting something like this in a fully autonomous network. Was the equivalent area to 17 Central Parks. Now, then you start to think, I mean, you might not get the same land value of reclaiming some of the footway that you might for a full building plot. But if you're looking at something like that and the scale that you could get and how that could transform the city, more green space, more people coming back into the city, that's a big challenge at the now, is how to revitalise city streets and the high street. Huge potential in that area, and there's an economic case to be made for it as well. So I guess to sum up, I think that transport, in terms of the city, the future of the city and property, is the link between people, between the place and activity. So many benefits about employment, education, health, delivery of goods and services. It just gives it a better and more attractive city. And I think from my own perspective, I've been involved in the transport systems area for about 25 years. I know I don't look it, but I have been there for a while, and I think it's the most exciting time in my career. We deliver all of these things. It's from the full cycle, in research, the design, the implementation, operation of software and systems, and all of the services. And it's just, I think it's fantastic, and it's really instrumental to creating great future cities for tomorrow. So thank you very much.